So I've been playing around a lot with my head, just thinking some things out and taking some different principles and ideals and beliefs and whatnot from spiritual practice, and really just riffing on some thoughts. And I've kind of come up with a fun thought. Uh, I don't know that I've seen it as true at this point, but it's fascinating to me. And so I'm going to try and describe it to you, and hopefully I can remember all these disparate pieces in my head and have this make sense. Um, but I was thinking in terms of attachment. Attachment is this process of the self, the soul, or the spirit self, identifying with something that it's in very close proximity to as such. And that would be like the body. And so it thinks the body is itself. It thinks the mind is itself. All right. And then as an ego individual, as a person, we attach to certain thoughts, our things that we want or things that the body wants. We would say we want because we're identified with the body, right? So when we're hungry, we're like, hey, I'm hungry, right? We don't say, hey, the body's hungry. We say, hey, I'm hungry. And when we're attached to the mind, we say, hey, I'm angry. We don't say the mind is angry, right? We say, I'm angry. And that betrays our attachment, that we think it's ourself, that the mind is ourself, that the body is ourself. All right, so fine. Now, when we attach to a thought in our mind, okay, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, we actually imbue it with our sentience. When we have a thought that we think is our thought, and we like that thought, it's describing perhaps a new piece of cake for us, we attach to that thought, and we imbue it with our own existence, our own love, our own wisdom, right? We imbue it with our own nature, as it were. And so it takes on a life of itself. Now, this is where it might get a little bit trippy, but follow me through here. When you have a thought that you're deeply attached to in your mind, it takes on a sentience, it takes on a life of its own, and it will argue with you in your own mind, right? And the mind is a very, very funny organ to watch for a couple of reasons. That when you like something, or when you are attached to a thought about something, and you've imbued it with your own nature, because that's what attachment is, that's what happens when you identify with something, then it takes on your sentience, it gets a voice of its own. And so when you say, no, I'm not going to have 6 pieces of cake, I'm going to stop at 5, it's that thought of the other piece of cake that has sentience in your mind that actually comes back and argues with you. Oh, come on, have a 6th piece. What's the big deal? You can do this, right? Because in effect, there's only one person in this body, right? There's one person living here, and there's no one to argue with it in your mind. So what is it that argues with you when you say, I'm going to get up at 6, and then the alarm goes off at 6, and you're like, no, I can't get up at 6. I'll get up at 6:30. I'll get up at 7. I'll get up at 7:30. What's doing that? You see, what's doing that is these thoughts, the thought about 6:30 or the thought about 7 as your time to get up, that you were attached to that thought, and that thought took on your sentience. It borrowed its existence from you, and it argues with you to get up at 7 instead of 6, right? And so this is kind of the nature of the mind. Now, we've talked in the past about the possibility that we live in a mind and not in a world, right? And the reason that I make that case is because when you look at something, that what you're seeing stops at the back of your eyes, right? That light doesn't go to your brain. So actually the brain has never seen the light of day, and so it creates a symbol for the light that enters the eyes, right? And it's the same for all of your senses. Your senses on the touch, they stop right here. What's going to my brain from here? Well, just that biochemical information of what I'm doing to my skin, what's going into my ear, what's going into my eye, what's going into my nose, what's going into my mouth, right? But none of that actually goes to the brain. So the brain actually is creating a duplicate of the external world for you to experience with your mind's eye. right? With that eye that you see with in a dream. But the problem is that you're also seeing with that eye right now, because again, like I say, none of this external world is coming in to the brain as the actual thing itself. They're all being encoded. It's all being interpreted for you. So we live in a brain or in a mind and not in a world. And so when we get these attachments, they become very real to us, right? Now, suppose that we are living in this universal mind, right? And we're just using a segment of it as our own personal mind. But we're living in this universal mind. And let's say that this universal mind is the mind of the divine, all right? And let's say you are a thought, right? You're a thought in that universal mind. And let's say God is attached to you. And so God shares that divine nature with you, that image of God, as it were, in Christian speak, or Satchitananda, as it is in the Vedanta or in Sanskrit. And so you being in God's mind, God being attached to you, right, has given you all of his qualities by that attachment, right? Now, to help you kind of get an idea of how that's possible, take this example. When you enter into a dream at night, you automatically take on a new dream body that has its own dream memories, that has its own dream history, its own dream narrative, and it may or may not have anything to do with your waking body, right? And yet, you instantly, painlessly, effortlessly, noticelessly become this new being in your dream, right? That's attachment. You, the sleeper, have identified now with a new thought that you imbue with your life, with your existence, with your love, with your wisdom, with your being, and you step into this dream world, which incidentally is also created by you, and you see yourself as separate apart in that whole dream world. So you see that the nature of our nature is actually identity, right? That this identity, anything that it attaches to, takes on its qualities and lives under that shared sentience. Now, all of us, if we're all thoughts of God within God's mind and God is attached to us, that would make God very much similar to like me, in the sense that I have a whole world, a whole universe within my own mind that I've created from my sensual experiences and whatnot from this world. And I've filled with attachments in there, voices in my mind, that I carry on with, that tell me jokes, or that I'm sitting there when I'm ruminating about things, or when I'm trying to do the right thing and there's a part of me that doesn't want to do the right thing, right? So we have the macrocosm and the microcosm kind of found within each other, a fractal within which any part of that fractal has the whole indicated within it. And so Swami Vivekananda says that this world is very much like that the macrocosm is in the microcosm, which means that we are all fractal containers of the whole, right? And this oneness. And so can you imagine that our thoughts may have a sentience equivalent to our sentience in the waking world, believing themselves to be real? And I've shared that lucid dream that I had probably, 15, 20 years ago now, or more, I don't know, about the young woman in my own dream when I became aware that I was dreaming, became lucid that I was dreaming. And I became fascinated with the detail of the dream. And I go over to this young woman, fascinated with the details and resolution with which she's being rendered by my own mind as I'm, now knowing that I'm dreaming. I'm studying her. And as I go over to her, she gets offended at me for getting too close to her space. And in the dream, I bust out laughing, because in the dream, I know that I'm dreaming. So I know that she's me. She's made of me. She's in my dream. She's paying me rent, as such. And for her to be angry at me for violating her space was hilarious to me in the dream. But when I woke up and thought about that, I realized something quite important there. I was like, wow, even in my own dream, someone in my dream can have that sense of separation from the whole that I share in my experience of the world, and have the feeling and the conviction that they exist separate and apart from me, who is the dreamer, who is the container of the whole world that they're living in, right? So I had that experience in a lucid dream quite a few years ago. So I'm putting all of this stuff together, and it's kind of, I find it eminently interesting, rather odd and challenging, but extremely intriguing. So all of those are thoughts and ideas, kind of all of these things tumbling together in my practice. I suspect that they're true. I suspect that that is a way, this world, if all of our worlds are put together the same way, who knows, that is a way of creating a universe. Anyway, just for your fun.